They saw him die. Asterisk. The body was taken down from the cross, wrapped in linen, placed in a tomb sealed by a stone impossible to move. Soldiers were stationed. A Roman seal was set. Everything was under control. Asterisk. The end seemed definitive. The sky fell silent. Hope was buried along with him. Asterisk. And for 3 days, nothing happened. No sign, no response, no movement. Asterisk. But let me ask you a question. Asterisk. What if God's silence is not absence? Asterisk. What if, while everyone thought the story was over, asterisk, the greatest miracle was being prepared? Asterisk. Because that morning, the impossible did not ask for permission. Death had no choice. Asterisk. And what seemed like the end was about to become the greatest beginning in history. The world did not stop. Asterisk. And maybe. That is the most painful detail of all. After the crucifixion, Jerusalem was still alive. The streets were still full. Merchants shouted their prices. Priests continued their rituals in the temple. Roman soldiers maintained order with the same coldness as always. Asterisk. Life went on, as if nothing had happened. But for a small group of men and women, everything had fallen apart. The disciples were hidden. Men who once walked beside Jesus, who saw the blind see, the dead rise, storms be silenced, were now locked away in silence, dominated by fear. Fear of the religious leaders. Fear of the Romans. Asterisk. Fear that they had believed in something that, apparently, ended on a cross. Asterisk. Peter, the most impulsive of all, no longer spoke with the same firmness. John, the closest, carried a deep silence, and the others tried to understand where everything had gone wrong. Asterisk. They had left everything to follow him. Families, work, security. Why? Because they believed he was the Messiah. But the Messiah should not die. Asterisk. Or should he? Asterisk. That question hung in the air, heavy, without an answer. Asterisk. Meanwhile, outside, the religious leadership of Israel, the chief priests and Pharisees, were not at peace. Asterisk. They knew the words of Jesus, and there was something that deeply troubled them. He had said that he would rise again on the third day, and even without fully believing, they feared one thing. Asterisk. What if the disciples tried to fake something? Asterisk. What if they stole the body? Asterisk. What if that story did not end there? So they made a decision. They went to Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor responsible for the execution, a man accustomed to politics, pressure, and the need to maintain order at any cost. They asked for something unusual. Sir, we remember that deceiver said, while he was still alive, that he would rise again on the third day. They called Jesus a deceiver, but still, they were attentive to his words. Asterisk. Curious, isn't it? Asterisk. Sometimes even those who reject the truth are impacted by it. They continued, therefore, order that the tomb be made secure until the third day. Otherwise, his disciples may come and steal the body and tell the people that he has been raised from the dead. This last deception will be worse than the first. Asterisk. The third day begins. Still in the darkness. Asterisk. Jerusalem sleeps. The streets, which the day before were full of voices and movement, are now silent. The air is cold, typical of the early morning hours. And there is something different in that moment, a stillness that seems to carry expectation, as if creation itself were on pause. But not everyone is sleeping. Some women walk through the still dark streets of the city. Among them is Mary Magdalene, a woman marked by a deep transformation, someone who closely experienced the liberating power of Jesus. With her, other women who had also followed the Master served with their resources, learned from his words. Asterisk, they do not go to the tomb with hope for a miracle. They go with love. They go with pain. Asterisk, they go to finish what they could not complete in the haste of the previous day, the burial rituals, according to Jewish custom. They prepared spices, aromas, everything to honor the body of the one who to them had been much more than a teacher. Asterisk, he had been everything. Asterisk, as they walk, a thought begins to arise, almost like a whisper among them. Asterisk, who will roll away the stone for us? Asterisk, the question is simple, but reveals much. Asterisk, they knew about the stone. They knew the weight. They knew that, humanly, they would not have the strength to move it. And still, they keep walking. That says something powerful. Faith does not always begin with certainty. Asterisk, sometimes, it begins with a step, even without understanding everything, even without knowing how. They walk. The sky is still dark, but little by little it begins to lighten. The first sign of light appears on the horizon. A new day is being born. But no one there imagines that this would not be just another day. It would be the day. And then it happens. The earth shakes, not like a common tremor, not like something natural. It is a sudden, strong shaking that breaks the silence of the dawn. A movement that comes from above, not from below. An angel of the Lord descends from heaven. It is not a symbolic figure. It is not a feeling. It is real. The glory that surrounds him cannot be compared to anything earthly. His appearance is described as lightning. His clothes white as snow. A clear manifestation of heaven invading earth. Asterisk. And he goes straight to the point. The stone. That stone which seemed impossible to move is not an obstacle for him. He removes it, not with effort, but with authority. And then he sits on it, as if declaring, without words, it is finished. Meanwhile, the guards, men trained to face war, violence, death, react in an unexpected way. They tremble and become like dead men. Asterisk, those who were there to guard, now cannot even remain standing. Asterisk, because there are moments when the natural meets the supernatural, and simply cannot respond. The women, as they approach, find a scene that makes no sense within human logic. Asterisk, the stone. Removed. Asterisk, the tomb. Open. Asterisk, and in that moment, everything they expected, a body, a farewell, a final act of care, begins to fall apart. Something is wrong, or too right. Asterisk, the pain that followed them begins to mix with confusion. The heart races. The mind tries to understand. Asterisk, what happened here? Asterisk, what could have happened? Asterisk, but deep down, there is something that still does not fit. They heard Jesus speak, more than once, about the third day. But, like the disciples, it did not seem possible. It did not make sense in the face of death. It did not make sense in the face of the cross. It did not make sense in the face of everything they saw. Asterisk, and still, they are there, before an open tomb. Asterisk, before. A reality that begins to challenge everything they believed was final. The sun begins to rise on the horizon. The light slowly invades that scene. Asterisk, and with it comes the revelation that the story did not end as everyone thought. In fact, it is about to be completely rewritten, and the question now is no longer about the stone. Asterisk, but about what or who is no longer there. The tomb is open. The stone, which once sealed the end of all hope, is now removed. The Roman seal has been broken. What represented authority, power, and control no longer has any value in the face of what has just happened. The women approach with cautious steps, their hearts racing, their breathing short, their minds trying to process something that simply does not make sense. They look inside, and what they find is not what they expected. The body is not there. The place where Jesus had been laid is empty. For a moment, everything seems to stop. Time slows down. The pain they carried mixes with something new, confusion, astonishment, and even fear, because an empty tomb can mean many things. Did someone take the body? Did someone violate that place? Or is something much greater happening? They enter. The interior of the tomb, carved into the rock, still carries the signs of a recent burial. But there is no disorder. There are no signs of haste. There is no evidence of theft. The linen cloths are there. And that changes everything, because no one steals a body and leaves the wrappings carefully placed. No one, in a hurried act, would have the time or reason to arrange that. When Peter and John also run to the tomb, this detail will stand out even more. The cloth that had been over Jesus' head is not thrown aside. It is folded, placed separately, order, calm, control. There are no signs of struggle. There are no signs of defeat. There are signs of something intentional, of something sovereign. Meanwhile, outside, reality still tries to find human explanations. The guards, who should have witnessed everything, are in a state of shock. The experience they had cannot be easily explained, and this puts them in a delicate position before the authorities. Because if that is true, then everything changes. Inside the tomb, the women remain trying to understand. The emptiness before them is not only physical, it is an emptiness that challenges everything they believed about death, ending, and impossibility. Death has always had the final word. Always. Kings died. Prophets died. Leaders passed away. None returned by themselves in glory, overcoming death itself. But now, something different has happened, and they are standing before this evidence. The tomb is empty. And this is not just a detail of the story. It is the center of everything. Because if Jesus is not there, then the cross was not the end. If the body is not there, then death did not win. If the tomb is empty, then everything he said must be reconsidered. Every word, every promise, every declaration. Everything comes back to the surface, but something is still missing. The empty tomb is powerful, but it is still not enough to bring complete understanding. It takes more than absence. It takes revelation. And that is exactly what is about to happen. Because heaven did not open that tomb just to leave questions, but to deliver answers. And in the next moments, those answers will confront not only those women, but all of human history. Inside that open tomb, while the heart is still trying to process what the eyes are seeing, something happens. They are not alone. Two angels appear. The biblical narrative describes that they are dressed in radiant clothes, seated where the body of Jesus had been placed, one at the head and the other at the feet. It is not a random detail. It is as if heaven itself is marking that place, witnessing what happened there. The women are frightened. The reaction is immediate. They bow down, their faces toward the ground. Before the supernatural, there is no way to remain indifferent. Fear takes over. It is not just fear. It is reverence. It is the recognition that they are before something that completely surpasses the natural. And then comes the question. Simple, direct, but deeply confronting. Why are you looking among the dead for the one who lives? This question cuts like a sword because it reveals something that no one there had fully realized. They were in the right place, but with the wrong expectation. They were looking for a body, but he was no longer a body. They were looking for someone dead, but he is alive. And then comes the declaration that changes everything. He is not here. He has risen. It is not a possibility. That is not a hypothesis. That is not an interpretation. That it is a statement that he has risen. Death has been defeated. What seemed final has been broken. And the angel continues. Remember what he told you while he was still in Galilee, that the Son of Man must be delivered into the hands of sinful men, be crucified, and on the third day rise again. Remember, it is not something new. It is not something unexpected in God's plan. It was said. It was announced. But in that moment, the pain was so great that the promise was pushed to the background. Now, everything begins to make sense. The cross was not an accident. Death was not defeat. The third day was not empty silence. It was fulfillment. It was purpose. It was plan. The words of Jesus, which once seemed difficult to understand, now fit perfectly before what has happened, and something begins to change inside them. The pain begins to give way to something new. It is not yet a complete joy, but it is the beginning of it. It is the birth of a hope that seemed lost. The heart, which was once heavy, now begins to race for another reason. What if it is true? What if he really defeated death? What if everything he said is real? That empty tomb now has a voice. Those words now carry weight, and those women become the first witnesses of the greatest turning point in history. They were not chosen by chance. In a society where female testimony did not have the same legal value as that of men. God chooses exactly them to carry the most important news of all time. This already reveals something powerful. God does not follow human standards. He chooses, he raises, he reveals to whom he wants. And now, with hearts burning between fear, surprise, and a growing hope, they receive a mission call on. Go. Tell. Announce. But even before they can organize everything within themselves, something even more extraordinary is about to happen, because hearing about the resurrection is already impactful, but encountering the living Christ, that changes everything forever. The words of the angels still echo in the minds of those women. He is not here. He has risen. But even in the face of revelation, the human heart still struggles to keep up, because there are moments when God has already spoken. But the soul still needs to process. Mary Magdalene, especially, feels this deeply. While the others begin to run to announce it to the disciples, she remains there, near the tomb. The biblical text shows this detail clearly. She stays, as if she cannot simply walk away. There is something inside her that is still searching. She weeps. It is not a light cry. It is the cry of someone who lost someone she deeply loved, of someone who was transformed by Jesus, set free, restored, and now believes that even his body has been taken, even after hearing that he has risen. She still cannot see Dot, and this reveals something very human. Revelation does not always enter the heart at the same speed it is heard. Sometimes an encounter is needed. She bends down again to look inside the tomb and sees two angels dressed in white, seated where the body of Jesus had been placed. They ask a simple question: "Woman, why are you crying?" And her answer reveals what is still inside her heart. "They have taken my Lord, and I do not know where they have put him." Do you see? She still calls him my Lord. The love remains, but understanding has not yet arrived for her. The only possible explanation is still human. Someone took the body. Someone interfered. Someone changed the end of the story. But heaven is about to show that it was not someone. It was God. Mary turns around and sees someone standing there. It is Jesus. But she does not recognize him. The text says this clearly. She did not know it was in God, and this raises a deep reflection. How many times is God already present, but our eyes have not yet perceived it? How many times is the answer already before us, but we are still trapped in the pain of what we think happened? Jesus looks at her and asks the same question. "Woman, why are you crying? Whom are you seeking?" It is not a question out of lack of knowledge. It is a question that reveals the heart. She, still taken by human logic, answers thinking he is the gardener. "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have put him, and I will take him." She still wants to care, still wants to honor, still wants to do something for the one she believes is dead. But then, Jesus does something simple and absolutely transformative. He calls her name, Mary. That is all. No long explanation. No speech. Just the name. And in that moment, everything changes, because there is something in the voice of Jesus that cannot be mistaken. There is something in that call that cuts through pain, confusion, and unbelief. She recognizes him. Her eyes open. Her heart understands. And she answers, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Now there is no more doubt. There is no more confusion. There is no more room for human theories. She is before him. Alive. Not as a memory, not as a recollection, but as reality. The one who is crucified is there. Before her, speaking to her. Calling her by name. And that changes everything, because the empty tomb was already powerful. But the living Christ is undeniable. Pain gives way to joy. Weeping gives way to testimony. The search ends because the encounter happened. But Jesus still adds something important. He tells her not to cling to that moment, because he would still ascend to the Father. And then he gives a mission. Go to my brothers and tell them. Now she is not just someone who is searching. She becomes someone who announces, the first to see. The first to hear, the first to witness, and the first to carry the news that would change the world. But not everyone is ready to believe, because hearing about the resurrection is very different from seeing it. And the next events will show exactly that. Mary Magdalene runs, her heart racing, her breathing uneven, her words almost stumbling over each other. She carries the most powerful news in history. But when she arrives, she finds an environment completely different from what she just experienced. The disciples are still hiding. Doors closed, fear in the air. Asterisk. The group that once walked with boldness is now withdrawn, trying to protect themselves. They know what happened to Jesus, and deep down, they fear they might be next. Mary enters and announces, "I have seen the Lord." Asterisk. She does not speak of a theory. She does not speak of a feeling. She states something concrete. She saw, she heard, she encountered. But even so, they do not believe. Asterisk. The biblical text makes this clear. Her words seemed like delirium, and this reveals something important. Even those who walked with Jesus had difficulty believing in the resurrection, because this goes beyond human logic. Peter and John then run to the tomb. Asterisk. John arrives first, looks from outside, sees the linen cloths there. Peter arrives right after and enters. He observes everything carefully. Nothing out of place. Nothing rushed. Everything in order. Asterisk. The tomb is empty, but full of evidence. Asterisk. John enters as well. And the text says something interesting. He saw and believed. Asterisk. They still did not fully understand the scriptures, but something was already beginning to settle within them. Asterisk. Even so, they return home, still processing, still trying to understand. Asterisk. And it is in this scenario of fear, doubt, and uncertainty that something extraordinary happens. Asterisk. Later that same day, the disciples are gathered. The doors remain closed because of fear of the Jews. Asterisk. And then Jesus appears without warning. Asterisk. Without any door being opened. He is simply there, in the midst of them, alive, real, present. And the first words he says are not of rebuke. Asterisk. They are of peace. Asterisk. Peace be with you. Asterisk. He could confront. He could remind them of the fleeing, the denial, the abandonment. But no, he brings peace, because the resurrection does not come to condemn those who failed, but to restore. Jesus shows his hands, shows his side. The marks are still there. Asterisk. The cross was not erased. It was overcome. Asterisk. And when they see, everything changes. Sadness gives way to joy. Asterisk. Fear begins to lose its strength. Doubt begins to fall. Now it is no longer a report. Asterisk. It is no longer someone else's testimony. They are seeing the Christ who died is alive before them. And then Jesus reinforces, "Peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, I am sending you." Now there is a mission. Those men who were hiding are being called to go. Asterisk. Those who were afraid are being sent with purpose. Asterisk. The resurrection is not just an event to be celebrated. It is a truth that must be proclaimed. And in that moment, Jesus breathes on them and says, "Receive the Holy Spirit." Something new is beginning. A new stage. Asterisk. A new story. But there is still an important detail. Not everyone was there. Asterisk. Thomas, one of the 12, did not witness that moment. Asterisk. And when the others say, "We have seen the Lord," he responds with brutal honesty. Asterisk. Unless I see, unless I touch, I will not believe. Doubt. Honest. Human. And this sets the stage for another transforming encounter. Asterisk. Because Jesus does not ignore those who doubt. He reveals himself, and the next moment will prove that in an undeniable way. Asterisk. 8 days pass. Asterisk. The disciples are gathered again. The environment still carries marks of what they experienced, a mixture of joy, disbelief, and an internal process happening within each of them. Asterisk this time. Thomas is present. Asterisk, the one who said he would only believe by seeing. The one who expressed what many would feel, but would not have the courage to say, "The doors remain closed." And once again, Jesus appears. There is no announcement. There is no preparation. He is simply there. Asterisk. And he repeats the same words. Asterisk. Peace be with you. Asterisk. But now, the focus is clear. He turns to Thomas, not with rejection, not with harshness, but with mercy. Asterisk. Put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe. Jesus responds exactly to Thomas' doubt, because he knows, he saw, he knew. Asterisk, and even so, he presents himself. Asterisk. This reveals something powerful. God is not afraid of sincere questions. He answers with presence. Thomas does not need to touch. He does not need to go to the end of what he said. Asterisk, because in that moment, everything is already clear. He responds with one of the strongest declarations in all of Scripture. My Lord and my God. It is not just recognition. It is surrender. It is faith. It is transformation. Asterisk, and then Jesus declares something that crosses time and reaches today. Asterisk, because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen, and yet have believed. This word is not only for Thomas, it is for all who, throughout history, would believe without physically seeing. It is for today. It is for now. Asterisk. The resurrection stops being just a historical event and becomes a personal calling. In the following days, Jesus continues appearing to the disciples. By the Sea of Galilee, he reveals himself once more. There, in a simple, everyday setting, he restores Peter, the one who denied him 3 times. 3 questions. Do you love me? It is not about condemning the past. It is about restoring the heart. Asterisk, the one who failed, is now reaffirmed. Asterisk, the one who denied, is now sent. Asterisk, because the resurrection not only proves power, it releases new beginnings, and then the final moment comes. Asterisk, Jesus gathers his disciples and gives a clear mission. Asterisk, go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. It is not a suggestion. It is a sending. Asterisk, the message of the cross and the resurrection was not meant to stay there, kept among a few. It was meant to reach the world, and they understood. Asterisk, those men who were once hiding are now ready to speak, ready to live. Asterisk, ready even to die, if necessary. Asterisk, because whoever encounters the living Christ is never the same again. The story that seemed to end on a cross turns into the greatest beginning of all. Death was defeated. Asterisk, sin was confronted. Hope was restored. And the separation between God and man received a path. Jesus is alive, not as a symbol, not as a memory, but as eternal reality. And this truth echoes to this day. The question is no longer what happened in that tomb. The question is, what do you do with it now? Asterisk, because the resurrection is not just to be admired. It is to be lived. And what began on that 3rd day. Asterisk continues transforming lives to this day.